Hi, hello, welcome everybody. And thanks for joining this session, the day 3 of the AMPscript Bootcamp. We are so excited to have you again. So I'm sure you're able to learn something, and I hope you are practicing all these hands-on demos that we are doing in the sessions. You are practicing and learning a lot from these sessions. We would welcome all the feedback that you may have if you want something to be covered in detail, or if you want something to be repeated, or if you want some other details to be shared, you are welcome to get in touch with me. So today's session is all about the data extension and date time functions, and Sandesh is the speaker. So I can't wait to listen to him and learn about the data extension functions. So a couple of things, all the sessions in these bootcamps are recorded. They will be uploaded to the YouTube channel Trailblazing Together. And all these sessions in this bootcamp are scheduled to be on Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern, but only the 5th session, which is by Cameron Robert. So because he is in a different time zone and not available at 12 p.m. Eastern, so we have that scheduled at 9 p.m. Eastern. Only that session will be at 9 p.m. Eastern, and rest all the other sessions will be conducted as is, like 12 p.m. Eastern. So I will be publishing the rest of the sessions. We have 5 sessions published as of now. So I will, in a day or two, I will publish the rest of the sessions. So make sure that you are already a member of the group, so you will get all the automated notifications, and make sure to register to all the sessions. So while we showcase these demos and the data extension functions, or any functions that we are discussing in the session, we would strongly encourage you to go and practice these in your MC org. So a quick question to you. So if you don't have the MC org, so how are you going to practice? We have covered that in the first session, and we have repeated that in the next session as well. So for those people who do not have the MC instance, so there is a way to still go ahead and practice the AMPscript functions, the SQL and the SSJS as well. So we do have a tool created by Pato. So can somebody give the name of that tool in the chat? So be sure to use that tool if you don't have access to the MC org. So we have the MC snippets. Yes. So MC snippets is the tool wherein you can it can be accessed from the browser. You can create your own data extension and practice the functions on that data extension. If you want to know more details about the usage of that tool, be sure to check out the first session, and also in the description I have included the link to the detailed video done by Pato. So he has all the guidance on how to use the tool and how it works and everything. Be sure to check it out. So we do have that option. We will be sharing all the code, also code and the slide deck. So when I upload the recording on the YouTube, I will include all the details and the additional resources and all of the external additional information in the description. Make sure that you are also checking the description area, so you get all the links to the code and the slide deck and other additional resources that we share. So the next session is going to be by Sabuhi on the site and API functions. And the other next upcoming session will be by Cameron Robert. The session timing is 9 p.m. Eastern. And I hope you're all registered to those events. If not, make sure that you have registered to that. So any questions that you have during the session, please post them in the chat window. We will address them at the end of the session. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Sandesh. Thank you very much for presenting this session today. So these are all the data extension and the date time functions, which are very, very useful whenever you are personalizing your email or in the cloud pages. So you need to get data from the data extension, manipulate the data. So these are some important functions. I would encourage you to follow these and practice them in your sales marketing cloud org. Sandesh, please take it over.
Thanks, Avi, and thank you for organizing this. I was in the past 2 sessions, and user interactions, everybody have been amazing. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining this session. Like Xavier mentioned, Today we're going to go through some data extension functions and datetime functions. You're hearing me, right?
Yeah, all clear, Sandesh.
Okay, cool, thank you. Yeah, and the use case that we'll be going through, and it's going to be kind of build heavy. So we will run through a few functions for data extensions, a few functions for datetime quickly in the beginning. And then we're going to go directly into a marketing cloud environment and build out event registration form that can be published to a cloud page. Okay. And we're also going to have some build sessions after this where members from the community can build along with the instructors. Saying that, let's quickly look at the data extension functions that we'll be covering today. The one on the left, these are what developers call the CRUD functionality, which is create, read, update, delete. I believe read was already covered by Tim last week, which was the lookup function, if you remember. So this time we're going to cover the other ones. So inserting into a data extension using insert data, updating a data extension record using update data, observing a record, which means insert, if doesn't exist. If it exists, update. That's what observe means, observing data, deleting a data that exists. And then there's one extra utility function that lets you find how many rows already exists in a data extension. And there are these other two category of functions in data extension category, the claim ones and the execute filter ones, not very commonly used, but still wanted to mention them. We'll dive into details just in a moment. So let's go through these one by one. Insert data. This should be pretty self-explanatory. Insert data inserts a row into a data extension with the column values listed. So if you look at the example row in there, it's a pretty straightforward syntax. Use insert data, parentheses open, and then the name of your data extension, which is currently a variable at DE. And then you just mention out all the columns that you want to insert. So last name populated with the variable last name, email populated with the variable email, and the register date populated with the variable today. And we will see all of these, or most of these at least, later in the session when we build out the form. Okay, so update data. Update data is also straightforward. So if there already exists a data that has a primary key, because remember, we need primary key for all of these other operations because Marketing Cloud first has to identify a record, right? You cannot really update a data if you can't identify a row that is the same primary key. That's why the syntax is a little bit different, where you use the update data function, the same syntax in the beginning, name of the DE, but then this first three fields is a little different compared to insert data. The second parameter here, 1, means that how many fields, how many columns do you want to match the record with? Currently, we're saying that we only want to match email, which is the primary key in our data extension. So if this email address exists, then Marketing Cloud will update all the other information. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Observed data is very similar. This is a combination of updating and inserting. So the same deal here with the primary key. We're saying if this email address already exists in the data extension, please update the fields that come after. Otherwise, insert this row, just like the insert would. And delete data, we don't need any extra information other than the primary key because all we're asking Marketing Cloud to do is to delete the data. Okay, and data extension row count, like I mentioned earlier, returns the number of rows in the specified DE, plain and simple. And we'll see some of these later in the demo. There's the icon there. So moving on to the rest of the functions. Claim row is an interesting function, claim row, both claim row and a claim row value. What it does is it returns a row or a value, depending on which one you use from a data extension, and locks the row. What that means is there is a field. In this example, the field is claimed. It will check that field and then return the field if this row is unchecked. So imagine a data extension with coupon codes, right? And then you want to find you want to look up in that data extension if there exists a coupon for a specific subscriber. And if it does, and if it is not claimed, meaning the is claimed Boolean field is unchecked, then claim row value will return that coupon code, second parameter. And if it doesn't exist, this one actually allows you to pass in a default coupon option, this variable, which you can make it NA, or maybe you have a default coupon to pass into your subscribers if there is nothing special for them. So great in that use case. And then it will also automatically check this field is claimed so that later on, if you use the same thing, the same coupon is not returned. It's kind of useful, but you can also do this. You can also achieve this using other data extension methods like lookup and update and all that. So it's your choice to either use this or use straightforward lookup rows. The other one is execute filter. I haven't personally seen this being used, but it is there. So what this does is both execute filter and execute filter ordered rows. These execute a predefined data filter. So if you have a data filter in an org, you provide its name in here, and then it executes it. If you are using execute filter, it's just that. You use execute filter, parentheses, and the name of the data filter. But if you also wanted to order the rows that's returned by the filter, then you can do so using execute filter order rows. You can also specify how many of those rows that you want to return. This is the top values if you are used to SQL. So match the filter, get top max return rows values, and sort by row. Okay, so if you want to sort by first name, this would be first name. If you want to sort by first name descending, this would be first name DESC, just like in SQL. Okay.
Sandesh, a quick question here. So I think it is for the upsert DE. Can you go back to that?
Yep, I see the question. That is correct, Claire. So two, if you pass in two in any of these, it means use the email and last name to match the record. So only if email and last name are the same, it would match that as a field, as a row. Yep, thanks for the question. Okay. Moving on to the date time ones. There's a couple of utility functions in the date time world that are useful, and we'll see some of these in the demo. Let's move through these. So the date add function returns a sum of date in an integer. And also we pass in this third parameter, which can be D, Y, M, or there are some other things that you can check out in the documentation. What that does is it adds on to that date, that value, integer value, and returns you the new date. For example, if you pass in today's date here, and then pass in 1 as the second parameter, it would, and then you pass in D, it would give you tomorrow's date. Okay, and if you pass in M, then it'll give you the date for the next month, Y next year, and so on. And the second one is now, this is a pretty straightforward and very useful function, which returns the current server time. Okay, date and time, the whole timestamp. Important thing to note is that this time is in central time without DST. The other one is date diff, works very similarly to the first one, which is date add. However, this actually returns a difference between two dates. And you can pass in a third parameter to only filter out the part of the date. For example, if you wanted a difference between today and tomorrow, then D, if you pass in D as the third parameter, the returning value would be 1. However, if you want a difference in months, say you pass in a month in January as the first parameter and the month in February is the second one, you would pass in M as the third parameter there, and you would get a difference of 1. That makes sense. These are pretty straightforward functions. Format date formats a given date by a format specification that you provide as a second parameter. So for instance, sometimes you have date timestamps that come in pretty weird formatting, and you might want a very specific format to display in your pages or in emails. Then you would use format date. Passing the date is the first parameter. The second parameter is going to be your month formatting. The third is going to be your time formatting. And then the last one is going to be something called a culture code, because sometimes depending on what the reason is, the date look different, or if there is a name of the month in there, then obviously the language is going to differ. So these things are handled by Marketing Cloud internally, so you wouldn't have to worry about those if you use this function. Okay, the last one is date part. This returns a specified part of the date. If we're already using these other functions, then this might not be very relevant, because these functions also allow you to only specify a part of the date anyways. But if for some reason you have a date and all you wanted is to extract the month or day, then this is how you'd use it. You'd pass in your date as the first parameter, and then specify D, M, Y, or some other parts that you might want from there. Does this make sense? If you have any questions, please post in chat. I'm kind of rushing through these because I want to get into the hands-on build demo. Okay, so before we move on to the tips, let's go and build a form in the cloud base. Okay, so going out of this. So before, I have set up something here that we shouldn't be going into, because this is not a session about cloud pages, right? So I set up a lot of the cloud pages tidbits in here so that we can focus only on the AMPscript that we learned today and in previous sessions. But just an overall quick view of this page. This is what the page looks like when published, right? So AMPscript Bootcamp. Let's not worry about the debug part for now. We have a text and we have a form. And when submitted, this will post data to a data extension has been created called Bootcamp registrations. That has pretty standard fields: first name, last name, email. And we're also tracking register date. This is where the datetime functions will come in. And we're also tracking this interest group, which in the form is a drop down between two values. Okay. And we don't really want to worry about any of the jargons behind how this is being posted. But if you're interested, what's happening is that this form, when posted, is posting to the same cloud page. Using this request parameter page URL function. Request parameter is a site function that will be going into next time, I believe. But what this does is it gives us the URL of the same page. So when somebody clicks on sign up here, it refreshes the page, but with the data loaded into it. Okay. And the fun part is here. This is all the AMPscript. This is where we'll write all the AMPscript that we'll be using today. And before we start, let's go through what's already here. This is also on the tips, tricks, things that I use personally when building these cloud pages or any AMPscript solutions, so that it's easy to debug while writing code. So first things I like to do is I create this paragraph or anything, any tag really. Thank you for the comment. You can see, I can definitely zoom in. Is this better?
A little bit more, Sandesh.
Okay.
The code is not visible, the code on the left side. I think it is good now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. So let's just move this to mobile. Okay. So I was saying, like to create this one tag, it's paragraph right now, where we where we set up a debug variable in the AMPscript part. The only purpose of this is to log things continuously as we debug our code. And if you remember the v function that we talked about last time, we're using the v function here to output that debug variable into the cloud phase. And currently, the value of that debug variable is let's start building. That's why in this debug place, you see let's start building. And later on, we're going to be populating this with other values, for example, to check if email address has been posted correctly, if we're getting the correct interest group, if the form has been submitted, and so on. Right, so that's one thing. So setting this up in the beginning makes it super easy, so we don't have to do this again and again. We don't have to go to other parts of the cloud page or an email to check this out, to remove this, for example, if it's ready for production, all that. And the other things I like to do is to set up configuration variables right at the very top, so that things like, let's not worry about this one for now, but things like DE names, maybe there's other things like success messages. What do you want to output when the form isn't submitted? All that stuff goes in the very top, so that whoever maintains this comes back to this, looks at this, and then finds everything that they need to change at the very top. Unless it's a complicated code issue, obviously, then they would need to dig into the code. But just to change the data extension name, they shouldn't really need to dig into that code, if that makes sense. Okay. So the first thing we should do then is figure out how do we even get these values, right? So currently, if we submit this, type in some random things for now. Sign up. This doesn't really do anything, right? Still says let's start building, submits, clears out everything, nothing's happening. So, however, we do know that this form is being posted, right? If we go into the form, it has an action, so it's posting to the same URL, standard form. So the first responsibility here is to actually grab those values from parameters. And for that, we're going to be using the request parameter function that we talked about earlier. What that does, so let's define some variable first. We need to first know if this form has been submitted, right? Because the first time a user comes into this page, they wouldn't have submitted anything. So we need to differentiate between the fresh load and the load after somebody clicks on sign up. And the thing that tracks that is going to be this is submitted variable. And the next thing we'll need is, of course, all the data, right? So first name, last name, email, and interest group. Just defining this at the very top. And now comes the part where we actually populate these with something. So let's only do is submitted for now and then see what happens. So let's set is submitted to be that function request parameter. And then to know which parameter to request, we need to go back to the form and then check out what the name of that parameter is. So for example, if we wanted first name, then we need to do request parameter first name. If we wanted last name, email, and so on. Here, if you look at this, something that's not visible in this page is this one input that is hidden. The name of that input is submitted, whose value is also submitted. And so whenever a user submits this form, this input is also posted. The user doesn't know this. We don't see this in the cloud page, but since this is part of the form, this will also be submitted. And if this is submitted, we can also request this as parameter because it has a name of submitted. Okay, so let's go back and then request that parameter called submitted from the form and then see what that comes through. Okay, so this is where the debug variable will be super helpful. So if we just set debug to be is submitted now, we should be able to see what that is submitted will be after somebody posts that form. Okay, so let's quickly publish this. Okay, and then go back, refresh it. We remove the debug variable, type in random stuff for now, because all we care about is that submitted. So do you see now it says submitted because that's the value of this is submitted variable, which should be clear because that's what we set it in the first place, right? That was the point of this form submitted value variable, which was submitted. It is pretty simple, so we could just use, for example, if condition. So if is submitted equals to submitted, then we can do all the logic, right? So here, what we'll be doing is insert data into data extension. We can be doing something like this. And if, so this is perfectly fine. But like I said earlier, if somebody goes ahead and changes that form and changes that value to something else, or whoever writes this AMPscript doesn't need to come down all the way through the code. That's the only reason we would rather use this value instead, and then check if it's submitted by equating these two values. So if we're getting a parameter of submitted as this value, which is submitted currently, then we know that somebody has submitted the form. And then we can deal with all the AMPscript now, right? We can insert data, we can try and find the difference between dates. We can do all sort of cool stuff in here. Okay, so if that is submitted, now we need to insert data, right? So ideally, we want to do something like this. We saw a function called insert data earlier, where we need a couple of things. We first need a data extension. I've already populated that using the DE variable. So all we need to do is to add DE. Now we need fields, right? Now we need a bunch of fields. We don't have them yet. So let's also set them. So because we're getting them as part of the same form anyways. So we can do like request parameter, first name. I'll be copying this because they are fairly similar syntax, right? So that's for last name, email, interest group. Last name, this is going to be email. And this is going to be interest group. Okay, now we should have all of these data coming in just like the submitted parameter. Before we do this, we could also check that, but in the interest of time, let's just write it down here. So in the data extension, if you remember, so we can go back to this, to the function. Insert data has this syntax, right? So the data extension name, column name, column value, another column name, another column value, and so on. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So column name is first name. And the value is that value that you extracted from the form. The second one is last name. And the value there is also going to be what you extracted. Email, same deal. And then there is interest group, which is also interest group. Okay. Now this should post something to our form using the insert data function. However, we don't yet have one of the fields. You remember, we got first name, last name, email, and interest group from the form, but we don't have the register date. And this is not something that we ask users. This should be something that the system provides. That's why what we're going to do is we're going to use that now function. Remember from here, now returns the current server date and time. So at the time this AMPscript runs, we want to find a date and then attach that to that register date field. Okay, so to do that, let's do register date here. I can make it longer for now. And then for the value of that, we can use the now function. Right, so we have all the fields now: first name, last name, email, interest group, and register date, which is dynamic based on when the form was submitted. Okay, so let's try this out. Publish this. Okay. Refresh it back. So let's do live test to live@live.com. This might also be a little small. Okay, let's try and sign up. So submitted, but we don't really see anything else for now. Let's go and check out our data extension. Okay, so bootcamp registrations. We check out records. This is it, right? So we got the data. We got live test, live@live, Tuesday, May 23rd. So this is current CST time. And interest group was admin. So this is plain and simple. Insert data, working its magic. I see the question. What is the difference between request parameter and query parameter? So query parameter only works for query parameters, whereas request parameter works for both post and get requests. So for example, query parameters are these things at the top. I hope you see the URL. So if you type something like query equals test, then this parameter query is a query parameter. The thing that is posted through a form is not a query parameter. That is a post parameter, and you need to use request parameter to get that. I do believe that request parameter also gets query parameter though, so it might be redundant. Okay, so continuing with the build here. This is not very user-friendly though, right? We submitted the data, we use insert data, that's great, but the user doesn't know. So instead of just using a debug, we need to somehow say you have submitted the form or some sort of a feedback message, and we can also work on that. So for that one, what we should do is set up a few more variables. Let's do that just below here, where we have other variables. We could also add it there. It's just trying to just trying to separate out things that we've been working on. And one quick thing about insert data. So if we go back here, in the first slide, I had both insert DE and insert data, right? So you might be wondering what the difference is. One of the differences is that insert data tends to only be used in cloud pages. Mostly, if you are using emails, then insert DE is the way to go. There are some small differences there and nuances. So I would recommend checking out documentations for those. But one of the other bigger practical difference for our purposes currently is that insert data actually returns a value, whereas insert DE does not. Insert data returns the number of rows affected. All of these actually do. So insert data, update data, observe data, return a value of 1 if they have affected one row. Meaning if insert data inserts a row, it returns a 1. Okay, so we can use that. Let's set up a variable here called is submitted, and another one called success, and another called error. Okay. So these will hold, is submitted holds is a Boolean that will be either 1 or 0, depending on if insert data successfully inserted the data. So let's set that down here. Let's set is submitted. So like I said earlier, if this submits a row, then is submitted is going to be 1. Okay, and we can use that to test if we have successfully submitted something. And success and error, respectively, will hold success and error messages depending on how this goes. Okay, now we can write a quick check here. If not empty, we remember this from last session. This is a great review. If it's submitted is not empty, then we can set a success message. Okay? You have successfully registered. see what the event. Sorry, forgot the set in there. So, okay. So what we're doing is if the data is submitted, then we're setting a success value if you have successfully registered and see the event. Now, how do we go about displaying this? Right? We did set a variable, but can we display it in the form? Yeah. I think we can, right? Because that's what we're doing up here in debug anyways. So we're using v, the function, to display a variable that's been set in the AMPscript part in the DOM or in the page, which means we can do something very similar down here in the form as well. And if we go to the form, can't click on this for some reason. Let's move back to desktop. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I've actually cheated a little bit and set this up beforehand, which was commented out, so it was not visible. But if we want to uncomment this, now what this does is we can also use inline AMPscript block to conditionally only display certain things. So what we're doing here is using an AMPscript if condition. So if success, the variable that we just set, is not empty, then we want to show this success message. Again, using that v, displaying success message inside a div, right? And the same deal with error. If we somehow notice an error, somehow we set it, then we also want to display an error message block. But we're not really concerned with that for now. Let's just focus on the success part. So if as soon as we set success up here in line 28, right, if it's submitted is not empty, if we have data in the data extension, then success is set to you have successfully registered, meaning it's not empty. And if it's not empty, then this AMPscript block will execute and it will display this block of code. Okay, let's see it in action. That's published. I'll refresh this again. That's the dummy value. Doesn't matter, sign up. Voila. Right, you have successfully registered, so you get the event. And if we go back and check this, there should also be it. Dummy 1.2, yeah, test, right? This is great. So only since inserted data into the data extension, the is submitted was true. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Oh, we actually reused this. So we might want to call this is inserted because we already have is submitted for the form submission. So let's replace that variable. Sorry about that. So if it's actually inserted, then we'll have it. Then we'll have a 1. If we have a 1, we set success. If we set success, we'll display that success message down in the form. Okay. Oh, I see there was a comment there. Thank you, Sudeshna. Yep, that was an error on my part. It's inserted. Okay, so that should make sense. Okay, so now, however, if we go back and let's see what data we already have in the data extension, right? Let's try and register again for a data that already exists. Remember, email is our primary key. So email is the one that's identifying every record. If we go back and let's try and register again for this user. Say somebody comes back to the page and then they forgot maybe that they registered and they attempt to register again. Let's see what happens. I'll paste this value and then sign up. Now there is an error. Why is this? So there are two things here that I wanted to mention. One is that error handling is pretty rough in AMPscript. So if we want to handle these pages and not crash the page, if something goes wrong, then we need to use SSAS blocks at the top and at the end. We can look at that later, or we can include that in the YouTube files that JB mentioned, since don't want to bog down with SSS right now. But there's a quick fix for this one for our use case. What's happening is that we're trying to insert the same primary key again, right? So how can we avoid that? Two ways. The simple way is if we go back, we have another function called observe data that will only attempt to insert if there is no primary key already existing, right? If there is a primary key, if the primary key matches a record that's already there, then it instead will update that record. Okay, so that's a quick fix. If instead of insert data, had we used observed, expecting that user behavior, then we would be all set. However, you might have noticed that, like I said earlier, the syntax is slightly different because insert data does not really need that column to check the row for. What we do in observe. So what we do is we ask it to only check one column with the one, and then we'll move this email field to the front because this is the primary key that we wanna match on. Right? So observe data, check if the email already exists. If it does, then update all the other fields. Otherwise, insert. So if we schedule and publish that, hopefully, and then let's go back to the form, try it again. That's not the email. It's test.test.com. Let's go back and then let's also see. So test currently has an interest group of marketer. Let's try to change that to, oh, marketer doesn't even exist. Change to developer and then sign up. It says you have successfully signed up. Now, if we go back and refresh this data extension, then we'll see that the first user has become a developer now, right? Which is great because it's updated. Okay, so we went through a couple of functions. We inserted data using insert data and observed it if the user attempts to submit again. Right, but let's do one last thing. What we might want to do here is that if the user already exists, this is not really user friendly as well, right? Because we didn't really let them know that the record was updated. In order to fix that, we need to actually use update data. But to use update data, we need to first check if that record exists, right? And we already learned this function last week, which is just plain simple lookup. So what we'll do is before inserting data, we'll actually check if that value already exists. Okay, and to do this, we will define a couple more fields. So let's go up here and define something like old registration date, because we want to get that date only. Didn't really get any fields, doesn't really matter. And then let's go down here and set that old registration date to be lookup. Right, so we can do lookup, and then we want to look up the same DE. We want to look up register date. Again, we could have really looked up anything, and then the matching column is going to be email, okay, because that is the primary key. And what we want to now do is before attempting to insert it, we want to check if there is an old registration. So if empty old registration date, we copy that. Then what we want to do is set success. Let's give them a different message, right? You had already registered, but we're updating your info. Successfully. Okay, and well, I guess before doing that, we need to still observe data. All right, so let's copy that. Give me a sec, trying to see how to handle this. We can definitely duplicate it, no problem. Let's do that for now. So let's do that. And then let's set success to be the same message. Okay, so I'm going to copy this whole thing instead. We need 2 blocks here because we need to handle 2 different situations. Right, one is when they actually have it, and one they don't. So let's do that. And here we don't really need to observe. We can just update. Right? We don't want a marketing cloud to also look for that because we already did that using lookup. So we're just updating that data in that case, setting the success to be you've already set up, ending that if. And then if they actually did not, so that's that else condition here. If they did not previously register, then we can just go back to our old insert data. Just going to copy that again. Right here, we can go back to insert data because we are sure now that they don't have anything. And then we don't need that one parameter. We can leave the email as is. Now we're just going back to inserting column value, and so on. Okay. And here we want to set the success message to be just plain old. You have successfully registered. So you have the next event. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So what we're doing first is if the form is submitted, we are looking it up via email. If there is no registration, then then it's business as usual. We just insert that data. We set the message and move on. However, if the data was there, then its inserted wouldn't be empty. That would return that date. Sorry, old registration date wouldn't be empty. To return that date, and then we'd go ahead and update the data, set the success message like this. Okay, it's a bunch of code we did. Hopefully, things are correct. Okay, and let's go back and try. Let's try a last name. Sorry, this is just a test. If this does not exist, which it does not, then it should insert data, right? Successfully registered. However, if somebody already exists, for example, a test person, then, sorry, test2, test3, test.com. If we do something like this and sign up, then it gives a new message. You had already registered, but we have updated your info successfully. Okay, great. So we have updated data, we have observed it, and we have also inserted. I also wanted to cover the date functions, but I guess we're out of time. So I'll take in questions if you have any.
I'm looking at the chat, Sandesh, and thank you for the detailed overview of these functions. I'm sure everybody is able to follow. Any questions that we haven't covered or I missed answering, please share them again. I see a very good feedback for you, Sandesh. How many years of experience you got? You are amazing.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. Been using it for a couple of years now.
So one question, instead of inserting register date with the now, can we use field with data type date and select default value, use current date?
Oh, definitely. Yep, we can do that.
Thank you. And the question, do we need to write set @register date equals to request parameter of in parentheses and quotes register date?
We do not need to, because request parameter is only for things that we're pulling in from the form, right? We're only pulling in first, last name, email, and the interest group from the form. The register date is something that we're generating here, right in the code block. That's why we don't need to grab that. It actually does not exist, right? It'll be empty.
That helps. Thanks, Sandesh. One other question, can we use insert DE instead of insert data?
Absolutely, yeah. You can use that to insert data, but the difference again is that insert DE does not return anything. So we kind of don't know what happened, if it inserted data or not. Whereas insert data returns a 1 if it inserts a row. So it's kind of useful.
Awesome. So it is approved and certified that you are the master. I see that in the comment here.
Thank you. The community is too kind.
Thank you. What is the page URL?
Oh, that is the system. So might be talking about something that's here. Okay. This is happening again. Sorry, I can't click on the forms. Right, so I'd use request parameter page URL. This is something like a personalization string, but for parameters. This will give you the current page URL, no matter what it is, right? Because what I could have done is I could have copied this same URL and pasted it here. That also works. However, if somebody wants to use this code somewhere else, then they would need to go ahead and remember to update this. So it's better to make it dynamic by using this. So this is pretty much the same as this thing up here. So dynamically populated.
Wonderful. So I'm reading out the comments loud. Super useful. Thanks. Very useful. Thanks for the excellent demo. And I see no other questions, Sandesh. I think we have cleared everything. And thanks for spending your time. And thanks for your patience answering the questions.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for joining this session. We have more sessions coming up. Be sure to register to all the sessions and hope you all have a great day or great rest of your day. Have a good one. Bye.